Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanya Chalmik. Thank you for being here. And I'm very happy that you're here to listen to the self-awareness in action presentation that I'll be presenting. So why self-awareness? Well, I believe self-awareness to be that overarching skill of emotional intelligence that we need to master so that we can bring our best selves forward. Research shows that self-awareness, knowing who we are and how others see us, is the foundation for high performance, smart choices, and lasting relationships. There's just one problem. Most people don't see themselves quite as they clearly could. So let me ask you, have you ever asked yourself, oh my God, what just happened to me? I never imagined I would be in this situation. How could I have not seen this coming? Think about that situation for a moment. How did you handle it? What did you do? What actions did you take? If self-awareness is a journey, then insights are the aha moments along the way. I have had many moments of self-awareness in my life, but the pivotal moment where I was able to see my life from outside in happened in 2008. In fact, two things happened. One, I learned about the use of self-concept as part of my HR development training at McGill, led by Beverly Patwell. And I immersed myself on the journey to becoming more self-aware. And little did I know that a huge aha moment would come to me that summer where I would act on my insights and make a major life change. So you see, the journey of self-awareness is a lifelong one. It's a continual process of looking inward, questioning, and discovering the things that have been there all along. Living on autopilot, folks, is no longer an option. It's time to confront the truths about ourselves, to lay a stronger foundation for living a more intentional life and a more conscious use of ourselves. So what do we need to know? Well, first of all, we would need to understand what self-awareness really is. Why is it important? And how can we boost our self-awareness? Now, we only have an hour today, so we're going to give you as much information as possible, but this is a lifelong journey, and we're all starting at some point, right? You're all here today because you're curious and you want to know and you want to learn. So this is the starting point. So let me ask you, the audience, on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd like to understand how self-aware are you? So if you could complete the poll that I'm going to ask, I believe, Jonathan to create the poll. If you can complete that, that would be wonderful. Okay, so we have 15% minimal self-awareness. We have 45% inconsistent self-awareness. We have an audience of 31% that feel they're quite self-aware. And very self-aware, we have 10%. Okay, these are very interesting numbers and going to validate as we move forward, but nice to see that we have pretty much in the middle inconsistently self-aware. So we've got quite a few 3s and some 4s and some 2s, a couple of not even 2 1s, very lax self-awareness. Well, I hope at the end of this webinar, you'll be able to gain a little bit more self-awareness as we move forward. So thank you for completing that. Well, let's first see what self-awareness really is in terms of the definition. We look at the basic definition. It's how an individual consciously knows and understands their character, their feelings, their motives, and their desires. We take it a little bit one step further. Tasha Eurich states that the ability to see ourselves clearly, to understand who we are, how others see us, and how we fit into the world around us. So, self-aware or unaware? Well, according to research, even though most people believe they are self-aware, there's only 10 to 15% of people that were studied that actually fit the criteria. And so here we have also, based on our audience, 15% felt that they were, no, actually we had 45% that felt that they were self-aware and 31% that felt they were really self-aware. So the reality is 15%. And this is why, I guess, the purpose of wanting to bring this kind of webinar forward is because we need work to be done here in terms of how self-aware we are and how we can really develop it. And I think it's because we need to really understand the whole gamut of self-awareness. So self-awareness isn't one truth. There's a reality, and there's what the cat thinks he actually is. And the reason for that is that there's two types of self-awareness, right? To make the complete. One is the internal self-awareness. So how well do we see ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, and our values, while external self-awareness is understanding how others view us with those same factors. And so this is why understanding the internal and the external self-awareness, it's that balancing, is what's going to make us a lot more self-aware. So we need to look at both. There's a test, and a lot of the work that I'm covering today is based on a book called Insight by Tasha Eurich. And she talks about the 4 archetypes of self-awareness. And at the end of the resources, I'm going to give you the link where you can actually take this test. And this gives you a bit of an indication as to where do you fall in the 4 quadrants. So in terms of external self-awareness, internal self-awareness, are you high? Are you low? What does it mean to be aware? What does it mean to be an introspector, a seeker, and a pleaser? Some of you may already figure out where you would fall into this quadrant, but once you do the test, you'll be able to really see. And once you do the test, also, you kind of become part of a community of self-awareness, wanting to be those unicorns of self-awareness. So really building that up. And that's something that's, again, like I mentioned, a continuous process, a continual journey. There's always something that we learn about ourselves, and it's what we do with that information. So this is where you would be able to see where do you fall. So perhaps our self-aware people, 45% would fall there, and 31% will fall somewhere in between the seekers or the introspectors or the pleasers. This gives you an idea of where you would fall into the self-awareness quadrant. Now, we said that 15% are considered self-aware based on the criteria. Well, what criteria do we need to have to be self-aware? So what do you think are the pillars of self-awareness? I'm going to ask you to complete or to write directly in the chat, and I'll be looking at that. I forgot to mention earlier, but feel free to use the chat directly with me, and I'll be monitoring any questions that come in. Hopefully we'll save the questions for the end, but I do have some questions along the presentation, so you'll be able to respond. So if I asked you what the pillars of self-awareness are, what do you think they are? What would make you self-aware? So for those people who said they're self-aware, what makes you self-aware? Introspection, yes. Interaction with others, working with others. Self-knowledge, yes. Knowing your blind spots and triggers. Yes. Or where do you type the response? You can type the response directly into the chat. Being aware of your image, taking time to return, self-regulation, self-confidence, metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Yes. Okay. These are great. Mindfulness, therapy. Great responses. And you've covered some of them, but some of them are not fully covered. So we're going to look at what they are. So according to Tasha Eurich, in terms of being very insightful and self-aware, there are 7 things, 7 criteria that we need to cover. Some of them deal more with our internal self-awareness, and some, of course, will deal more with the external self-awareness. We're not going to get deep into them, but we need to understand the principles that guide us. So those values, what are the things that we value most about our lives and so forth? Passions, understand what they are. What do you love to do? Your aspirations, what you want to experience and what you want to achieve. Environment and fit, that you require to be happy, energized, and engaged. And I think that's something, especially what's going on, what most people have gone through in the last 18 months. It's really, really important to take that step back and do this work of understanding what are your values, what are the things that you are passionate about, what are your aspirations, what environment do you want to be working in or to be in that brings out the best of you? Because if you're not in an environment where you feel that you're happy and energized and engaged, then that is something that needs to be revisited and looked at, because we're not going to bring our best selves forward if we're not in an environment where we can be the most productive, because environment is conducive on performance at the end of the day. So it's in any facet of your life, whether it's a workplace or at home life, environment is very, very important. When we think about patterns, what are the consistent ways of the way that you think and the way that you feel and the way that you behave? Reactions, the thoughts and the feelings and reactions that reveal your strengths and weaknesses. How are you responding to things? How are you reacting to things? What are your triggers? And the impact, the effect that we have on others, right? So every decision that we make, every choice that we make is going to have an impact on others. So in order to be truly self-aware, we need to build on these pillars to understand our impact, how our behavior affects others. So don't be blind, but be aware. So let's look at how we could look at this. So I don't know if anyone has seen the Jahari window before. This was developed by Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham. And the reason why it was called Jahari is that J-O represents Joseph and Harry. And so that's why they named it the Jahari window. So they kind of took their first names. This was developed in 1955. And the intention with that is to use the Jahari window as a tool, as a technique to see the relationship that we have with ourselves and the relationships that we can have with others. And so as you can see, there's a quadrant, there's 4 spots. The left side is really known to self, is really understanding yourself in terms of how are you showing up in the open area? And what are you deliberately not showing or demonstrating? So that's the left side. And the right side has to do with the external, which is not known to yourself, but other people can see that. So those are your blind spots. And the unknown area, which is neither you nor others know about that. So the open area is affected by every situation. It's typically going to be large in known and safe situations and smaller in the unknown and the unsafe situations. The blind area is where others know something, but you don't necessarily know. So you could be giving a presentation. I haven't eaten all morning. I'm hungry. I'm showing irritability. You see the irritability. I don't necessarily see it, but there's something that you see that I don't. The hidden area is consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously not divulging. Now, this could be intentional and or unintentional, but it could be also due to circumstances. So what's preventing you from being open about certain things, whether it's at home, whether it's in the workplace? Do you struggle with nerves that you don't want people to know? Your political views? If you demonstrate certain behaviors of jealousy, or you're very competitive. So those are intentional things that we keep hidden from others. This is where you need to ask yourself, why do you do that? And is it because you don't feel you're in a safe place to demonstrate those behaviors? So what the Jahari window is showing, it's pretty much allowing you to see what are the things that you are bringing forward and what are the things that perhaps you're not. And the pretense is to try to open up that green window as much as possible. So being true to ourselves and being in a position where we can feel open and honest about how we are and the things that we want to bring forward. But the reality is we're all humans, right? And we're all going to deliberately, consciously or unconsciously, keep things hidden. And so this is where you need to decide, is this information that I do want to divulge? Do I feel safe in a place where I can divulge this information or not? So what I like about this is it really kind of gives you that snapshot of where do you fall in terms of that window, and work around trying to be into the open area as much as possible. So this is the Jahari window. This also can help in situations where perhaps you need to have a meeting with an employee and you don't know how to start that difficult conversation. What you can do sometimes is, and there is something on the internet, if you look up Jahari window, it can give you a set of adjectives. And if you use those same set of adjectives, that you could ask the person to complete their window in terms of how they see themselves, and then you complete the window based on what you see them with those same criteria, that could then open that discussion of, you'd be very surprised that someone who, and for instance, it happened that a supervisor was supposed to sit down with an employee, and during meetings, he's always felt that the employee never spoke up, just never really participated. And it was a little bothersome, but he didn't know how to bring that forward. So by completing the Jahari window, there was an adjective that described introvert. And so both of them had placed it. And when they placed introvert in the open area, it was very telling to the supervisor, because he felt now he can have that conversation with that employee about him being introverted, and realize that that's why the person was not able to really speak up at meetings, because of his personality. So sometimes doing an exercise like this could open that door to have those discussions and to get to know each other better by knowing each other's personalities. So this is why the Jahari window is actually a really useful tool, and it can be used in the workplace. It can be used even with colleagues, that you could ask colleagues based on the same criteria, how would they describe you, and so forth. So something that came out in terms of the pillars was introspection. And absolutely, this is what we do all the time. We self-reflect and we introspect. The ability to consciously examine our thoughts, our feelings and motives and behaviors. Now, if we look at the questions below, why do I like an employee A more than I like an employee B? Why did I fly off the handle with that particular employee? Why am I against this project? So these are the things that are going through your mind. The problem is, when we ask a question, we need to take it from the victim state, because the why always puts us in the victim state. And we need to move to the growth state, because the only way that we can move forward is by right, asking the right questions. And by moving forward, that's when we're going to learn to respond to a certain behavior. So how do we gain insight is not by asking the why questions, but asking the what questions. Just look at, if you asked yourself and read from, why do I feel terrible? Why did you say that to me? Just starting a question with the why already keeps you in that state of negative emotion, draws on your limitations, and traps you in your past, right? The whole point is you want to move forward. So what is the situation that's making me feel terrible? What are the steps I need to take in the future to do a better job? Asking the what question takes you from where you were to where you want to go. It helps you see your potential and it keeps you curious. Now, don't get me wrong. We're always going to ask that why question, right? We all do it. The thing what I want you to understand is don't stay there. Maybe ask that first why question. Realize that asking that why question is not going to get you to move forward. It's the what question. And when you reframe it to a what question, it's going to bring you to more solutions focused rather than problem focused. And that's the whole point, is that you want to move forward and you don't want to stay in the same place. When you move to solutions rather than focusing on the unproductive patterns of the past, then that's how you can get to move forward. So you want to introspect correctly and right. The evil twin to introspection is rumination. Okay, who doesn't ruminate? We all ruminate, right? I mean, that's something that we keep doing over and over, right? So it's a process of continuously thinking about the same thoughts, our fears, our problems, our insecurities, and that really hurts our ability to see ourselves clearly. We neglect to think about how we show up when we do that. And this is a huge barrier to self-awareness. Why? Because it tricks us into thinking we're productively self-reflecting, but as it turns out, we're not. It's an inverse relationship to that. So when you actually think you're doing the introspection, you're ruminating, you're thinking of the negative thoughts, and that's not going to get you anywhere. So again, it's how do you stay there and how do you get out of the rumination phase? That's what's important. So let's take a look at a little self-assessment here. How much do you ruminate? So there's 7 questions there, and give yourself 1 point for yes answer. You don't have to put that in the chat if you don't want to say how many you've answered, but we are going to show you that what that looks like in terms of a little assessment of how much you actually do ruminate. So take a couple of minutes just to look at the statements and be true to answering those statements. I'll give you just a minute there. Some things I've said or done. Sometimes it's hard for me to shut off negative thoughts about myself. I often find. Okay, so let's just take quickly a look at whatever you fared. Okay, so what kind of ruminator are you? Because we're all ruminators. But on a score of 4 or more, are you a frequent ruminator? And though you may recognize that you've fallen down the rabbit hole, it's difficult for you to stop ruminating, which is considerably harming your self-insight and well-being. A first step might be to gain a better understanding of your triggers. So do certain situations or people set you off more than others, right? Are you a moderate ruminator? Sometimes you're able to notice and stop it. At other times, it can take over, clouding your self-insight and hurting your well-being. And are you a rare ruminator. So you might not be a rumination zero, but you successfully can stop yourself in the tracks, which improves both your self-awareness and your well-being. So I don't know where you've fared in there, but we all ruminate. We can all see ourselves there. The thing is, what can we do to help stop that? So some of the things that we can help stop ruminating. The first one is people who do not necessarily care about your mistakes as much as you do. So for instance, you were giving a speech at a fundraiser, and either you forgot a little bit of the part of the speech, or you felt that you didn't deliver the speech in the right way. You forgot certain points you wanted to mention. And so this is something then that all that you can do is think about that. But the bigger picture was that for the fundraiser, they probably raised, or they did raise, the most money that they did in a few years. So the outcome of raising the funds was bigger than actually your presentation. So what happens is we get fixated on something that we think, oh my goodness, I didn't do well. Meanwhile, everyone's past it. Like, they listen to your presentation, next they move on, and the point was the fundraiser was successful. So this is where sometimes we have to say those little things don't necessarily affect everybody else as they do myself. And this is where I have to learn to stop. Choose to learn from difficult situations. So whatever situation that you're in, what can you learn from that? Again, so taking that notion of introspecting from the why to the what. Convert those questions to the what questions, and what can I learn? Because again, we stay in a negative state, we can't move forward. Hit the pause with a distraction. So you're going through a certain problem and you can't seem to get past it. Sometimes it's important to pause, get up, walk, do something, look outside, do a power pose, whatever it is. It clears your mind for a few moments, and you know you're going to come back to it, but you're going to come back to it in a different mindset. The practicing of the thought stopping. So you're not getting anywhere with this. And this is also very difficult to do. But when you get into that moment where you keep thinking about a certain situation or problem, and you can actually say to yourself, you know what? This is not serving me. I'm not getting any resolution from doing this. I need to stop it. So you intentionally put the stop. And get a reality check. Share your situation with a friend to get an impartial perspective. That to me is probably one of the most valuable. I often do use the strategies in terms of, I'm going down the rabbit hole. I see this. I'm aware. I need to stop. I need to move. I need to do something to change the mind. But I also like to do the check-in. So I'm feeling kind of this. What's your perception of that? What do you think? Get that check-in from someone that's reliable and impartial, who can give you that perspective. So this is going to help you a little bit with the rumination that goes on, that we all do. So how can we boost our internal self-awareness? Well, we can learn and get insights from all sorts of things that happen to us in our daily lives, in our life events, right? So if we say that the journey of self-awareness is a lifelong one, then the aha moments and the oh moments also are those insights that we get along the way, and it's what we do with them. So if we want to learn from new roles or new rules, what does that mean? Well, the new roles actually stretch us outside of our comfort zone. So when we looked at the Jahari window and the unknown quadrant, right? There are things that we've never explored before that we wouldn't know unless we explore. How do we get out of the unknown is if we go into something that's new. So it stretches us from our comfort zone. And it could be a skill, right? You never knew that you were good at, designing. Okay, or you had an artistic side to yourself that perhaps you didn't explore. Well, it's only until you explore it will you know that you're good at it or not. So that's how we learn through our self-awareness, is the insight we get when we explore ourselves into something different and something new. So that stretch of taking us out of the comfort zone. The volcanic events, and these are the life events, right? So it could be death of a family member. It could be, divorce. It could be a move. Those are acute events that shake us to the core. And when they shake us to the core, we learn something about ourselves. What is happening? And, the questions I asked you at the beginning, were you ever in a situation you asked yourself, what is happening to me, right? Those are those earthquake moments. People have gotten fired, let's say, for positions that you never expected. Why? What happened there? What can I learn? What's going to be my next step, right? So those are those volcanic events where we learn things about ourselves. And the everyday insight. So sometimes we see our behaviors in a totally different light. And sometimes that comes to us by doing either mundane tasks, right? You could be just filing or doing something that's not taking much of your mind, but you gain insight by doing something like that. Or for me, I could be, doing the dishes, and all of a sudden my mind is clear. I'm not really thinking of anything, but I gained some insight into something about myself. And I realized, oh, I didn't really think about that way. So sometimes it's the everyday insights that come to us on normal circumstances or when we're doing mundane tasks. Now, mindfulness, of course, is the big one. So to notice what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and doing without judgment. So taking that behavior and asking yourself, what is going on that I'm feeling this way, and not judging it. Meditation is one way, and whether you have a mantra, and it's not for everybody, but you need to choose what works for you. So if it's a few minutes in the morning, if it's an app that you have, if it's something that you've listened to, whatever that is, when you quiet the mind and you quiet the noise, that's when you allow for a lot more clarity and you become more self-aware. So that's a very important part to incorporate into your everyday if you can. Reframing is something I learned back when I did do the development program and the use of self. And for me, building the muscle on reframing since then has probably been one of my biggest, accomplishments, I guess, in terms of my own self-awareness, because it's trying to see something from a different lens. And you're refining the problem as a challenge. So look at it from a different perspective. This is very helpful in problem solving and decision making and learning. And we're going to talk a little bit more of that in the next slide. The compare and contrast. So some people will say, why are you comparing and contrasting? Well, what we're comparing and contrasting to is the behavior about a certain thing. So 2 weeks ago, you were very happy with your position, what you were doing in your work. And all of a sudden this week, you're not feeling that same energy. You're not feeling the same, oh, what's going on? So what was it about 2 weeks ago that made you feel good about the work? What work were you doing? Were you leading a project? Were you involved in a project that was very exciting for you? Is that what made you feel good? And this week, you're doing something completely different. You're doing a task that's not necessarily, as exciting for you. So do the compare and contrast to understand what it is, and not just all of a sudden say, oh, that's it, I don't like my job anymore, right? Because that's what we tend to do. We group it into the bigger picture, but we need to bring it down into the steps in terms of saying, what is it that I'm doing or that I'm not doing that I enjoyed more or less of? So that's where the compare and the contrast comes in handy. And the daily check-ins. So when you want to do those daily check-ins, take 5 minutes to reflect on what you learned today. What went well today? What didn't go well today? And what did I learn, and how will I be smarter tomorrow? So the check-ins have to be meaningful check-ins, right? It's asking those questions and thinking about them and writing them or journaling them as well. So it's more than just reflecting, but actually take the time to write them down and to understand what it was that worked well or that didn't work well. So I talked about reframing a little bit, and the whole point of reframing is that it's not for them, it's for you. So you need to recognize when an intrusive thought is taking over and become intentional about stopping the thought and replace the thought with happier thoughts, right? So this is how we could move from a problem to a solution. And a lot of it has to do with the language that we use, right? So we need to use language to our advantage. When we already behave or we already think of a person or someone in a certain light, it's very, very difficult then to move forward if it's a negative thought. And reframing usually is to take a negative thought and to create it into something positive. So it's not the individual, but it's the behavior. We have a hard time separating, right? If you think that someone is lazy, you've labeled them as that. You've had an experience with that person that perhaps they didn't put in their weight on a certain project, and in your mind right away, you see them as being lazy. Well, that now has clouded your judgment. Now you've identified the person as being lazy when maybe what was going on was that week, the person was inundated with other things, maybe didn't show interest because something else was going on in their personal lives. And that's why they probably didn't bring out what you would have wanted or expected. And you have seen them as that, and you have pretty much labeled or categorized, right? And the whole point is we don't want to do that. So we kind of want to reframe the thinking so that we can get past it. So if you had to take some words like boring and lazy, critical, afraid and exhausted, or overwhelmed, how would you reframe? So I'm going to open this to the chat and take a word, any word, and tell me how you would reframe it. And so that you would be able to see beyond that behavior or the way you're judging the person to something more positive, because it helps you then move forward. So if anybody wants to go into the chat. Okay, so boring, disengaged, right. I love that one. Because right away when you see the person disengaged, you almost want to find out why. When you see them as boring, you've already closed the door. Love it. Critical, alternative viewpoint. Boring, different, yes. It's not my cup of tea. I love it. Lazy, demotivated, very good. Thank you. I see the messages. If you're writing to everyone, perhaps you can write to me, but disengaged still feels bad. I feel like it's still a label. Okay, for some of you. So remember, the reframing is for you. So if for you disengaged doesn't work, you need to find another word that's going to help you. But maybe for the colleague, disengaged made them feel, I can get past this and I want to find out why. Lazy, not interested today, afraid, worried. Okay, so someone who's afraid, it could be worried, and that opens. So you see language, how that puts a barrier or how that could open the door for that conversation to have in order to move forward. So this is where reframing is a really, really good tool. Hypercritical, rough, intimidating, critical, wants to improve things. Okay, how do you improve critical feedback for improvement? Okay, overwhelmed, need to assess workload. So thank you for those reframes. I think they're amazing. And I also think that you're each going to find your own word, right? This is your language, but your language is going to dictate how you're going to feel and how you're going to respond to move forward. And this is why it's very, very important. So use the reframing to your advantage so that you can move forward. Great feedback. Thank you very much. So we talked a little bit about into understanding what self-awareness is. We talked a little bit about the introspection, the rumination, how to do that better, how to control the rumination. But there's other things that hinder our self-awareness. And those two things are experience and position of power. Now, Experience can lead to a false sense of confidence about our performance. It can also make us overconfident about our level of self-knowledge. This explains the 15%, the study of 3,600 leaders across many roles. Why? Because relative to lower level leaders, higher level leaders more significantly overvalued their skills. So let's first look at the experience, the false sense of confidence. You've worked in a company for 20 years as a HR professional, and it was maybe a public sector company, and so, or a company, a public sector, and you've worked a certain way and so forth. You now come into a new organization, also in a HR role, but it's a totally different industry perhaps. And so you have this sense of, I've got 20 years experience, I know what I'm talking about, I've seen all these situations, but now you're in a new climate. You're with new players, you're with new people and so forth, and new practices, right? The organization will probably have. So this is where you need to kind of say, I have this and it's great, this experience, and I'm going to be able to bring it when I can. But the reality is now, this is a whole new ballgame. And so I need to be open to learning and to absorbing, and then hopefully trying to blend some of my knowledge into the work to bring forward. But the expectation of thinking that what worked there is going to work here has to be, mitigated in a way. Because if we think that what worked well in one place is going to work well in another, and say, well, I brought this there and it worked well here, let's try it here. We need to be open to the fact that it may not. And so this is where that that experience, sometimes we feel it gives us that confidence that we think that we're going to be able to do something here. And we're coming in with this strength of ours, but at the same time, it could hinder our self-awareness because there's so many other factors now. There's different players, it's a different ballgame, it's a different industry. So I think this is where we kind of need to be self-aware that could be going on. The position of power is the lack of constructive feedback, right? So why do you think people in position of power don't get constructive feedback? Well, by virtue that the level, senior leaders have fewer people above them who can actually provide candid feedback. And the more powerless, comfortable people will give them feedback. So the people who are under them, chances are they probably won't give that constructive feedback because of fear. And the ones that are already above them, chances are they won't really necessarily go to them. And if they do, they have fewer people to go to get feedback anyway. So this is why that can hinder our self-awareness. So as one power grows, one's willingness to listen also shrinks. They think they know more, and they feel that seeking feedback also will come at a cost. So the whole thing about feedback, and this is where we tap into the external self-awareness, is where it becomes tricky and important at the same time. So at the beginning, when we talked about how can we close the gap between looking at building our self-awareness, well, we know that it's internal and external. And the external is where we really also need to bring that in so that we can find that balance. And how do we get externally more self-aware is, of course, by feedback. So some of you have already probably heard of 360 degrees. You probably have used them, perhaps not. I'm not sure. But, if you want to share in what context and what your experience is with it. But basically, 360 degrees is giving you data from all different directions. And approximately 30 to 90% organizations use this tool in one way or another. So there's advantages, of course, and there's a disadvantage as well. So the anonymity, is probably an advantage to the 360. It shows us how our self-view stacks up against others' views of us. And it's helpful as a first step in learning about pillars, like our patterns, reactions, and impact on others. Now, 360 degrees doesn't just apply to organizations. You can actually apply it in schools and community organizations as well, even in families. If you ask feedback from friends, parents, and teachers, and this was actually an example, the research showed that asking feedback from friends, families, and teachers turned in actually higher quality homework and even received better grades in the course. So you need to ask the right question. And the thing is, with the 360-degree reviews, you can use them, you have information to work with, and that's a tool. Another one that we can close the gap is asking questions to our loving critics. So who are our loving critics? Well, those are those people that know us well, that we can trust, but they also have a significant amount of exposure to the behavior. So when you're asking about a certain behavior, we need to look at a good way to ask this question. Let's look at it at kind of like a scientific method. So when scientists build theories, we test specific hypotheses about phenomenon we're actually studying. By the same token, if you can come up with a working hypothesis on how other people see you, for example, I think I have a tendency to come across as timid when I meet with clients. Is that your experience? This will give you a focused framework for the conversation and help you either confirm or deny your suspicion. So basically, it's asking the right question and probing on the right behavior. So this is how you're able to do it, is if you kind of frame the question this way. And another way of getting feedback, which I'm using this from Adam Grant. I love his work on Think Again. And he says, if you're kind of in a team meeting and you generally just want to get some feedback and you propose something new to the team or an idea, you ask them to give you a score of 1 to 10. Chances are you're going to get something in between, right? You'll get the 6, the 7, the 8, maybe you'll get the 9, really depends, right? Again, we look at psychological safety and all that, but you're going to get a score. The next question this should be, then how can I get close to a 10? And that's going to elicit the feedback that you need to hear in order to move forward. So it is all about the model, or the 3R model, about asking the right questions, reflecting, and then thinking how you're going to respond. So self-awareness actively focused on balancing the scale between internal and external self-awareness. It truly is a balancing act about understanding ourselves and our behaviors and how other people perceive us or see us, and knowing that knowledge and then knowing what actions we want to take or how we want to respond to that. So that really is a balancing act. And it's something that we do every single day of our lives, right? We're just always learning something new about ourselves. So if I asked you to come back to the question of how self-aware are you, for those who put the 1 and the 10, we don't have to do this poll, but having heard this whole part in terms of what self-awareness really is, what would your score be? And would it be the same or would it change? I'm bringing this point in terms of this next slide, that self-awareness really transforms us into supernovas. And we become better and brighter than we were before. I'm using Simone Biles as an example because of, what did she do and what actions did she take when her insight was really an oh no moment and not an aha moment. She had to listen to her gut, to her oh no moment, and she made a conscious decision to stop competing until she was physically, emotionally, and mentally ready to return. And she did. And when she did return, she excelled, right? She wanted. So what I'm saying here, and I guess I'm reiterating, is that we need to listen to ourselves. We need to quiet the noise, the rumination, introspect correctly, listen to the gut. What is this saying to me? And then do something with that insight. Take some action that's going to help us. And in the end, it made her stronger and better and a lot more happier in her life because she needed to take that pause. She needed to take that step back in order to make that decision. And then she came back stronger. And that's what happens when you self-reflect on an incident that happened or something that's going on in your life, and you're able to see it from outside in, you're able to ask those questions when you have that aha moment or those ono moments, and then really reflect and think about how you're going to respond to that. That's what's going to make you more stronger and much more self-aware. So this concludes the portion on self-awareness. For today, honestly, it was really just to tap into what that really is and how can we improve it and how can we boost it. I'm going to take some questions and then we're going to do a wrap up. So we have a few minutes here. I'm going to open the chat and feel free if you have to ask any questions. You can submit them directly to me, or any comments or any insights that you would like to share. How do you teach that to your kids? How do you teach self-awareness to your kids? Well, I mean, that's a great question. And that's something that I think, the self-awareness really starts, there's an origins of self-awareness, right? Infant is, they don't even see themselves in the universe, who are they? And it does start when they're younger, to start thinking about who they are and the things that they like. And I think it's really telling them to be, and I've done this with my children, is to really be true to yourself, to really express the things that are meaningful to you, to understand the things that are important to you, to be able to share that and not feel that they're going to be judged. So it's to kind of understand, when we go back and we look at the values and the things, the passions and all that, there's work to be done there in terms of when we get to the adults. But I think that's something that could start at a young age with our children, is really think about, what are the things that are important to you and what are the things that you really enjoy, and have them start thinking about themselves in that climate of knowing the things that they like and they enjoy, and kind of moving along that pattern. So I think it's really something to have them speak up when they're feeling something, to be aware of what they're feeling and to be able to express that. Because if they keep it all in their minds, that's where the rumination comes in, and all the, self-delusion, all kinds of things come in. So I think it's to try to be able to express that as much as possible. Okay, I'm trying to filter some of the questions. Would you say that lack of self-awareness is related to a person's insecurities? And that once a person overcomes their insecurities, they will also be more self-aware. So so the insecurities, for sure. If you're aware of your insecurities, right? If you know that, okay, I know that I feel insecure about something, so I'm aware of it, and what can I do to deal with that? So I think the question is, if you know what the insecurities are and you can actually express them and you can actually work towards doing something about them. But I think the first thing is to be consciously aware that these are my insecurities, and I need to know, what can I do to work around them, or what do I need to do to develop that? So I think that's kind of that first thing, is to really understand what those insecurities are. What happens if there is ruminations on things that we already know that will not make us move forward? Okay, just want to understand the question. Okay, I'm just trying to filter. Do you think so? Do you think self-awareness and self-knowledge is the key to have strong personal wisdom and responsibility? I do think self-awareness and self-knowledge is key to understanding for sure. I think if we want to move to more of the wisdom, it's what do we do with that knowledge? So what action do we take with the knowledge that we know? And it's either we do something or we don't do something. So that's kind of where I feel is, so yes, it is that responsibility. Is it enough to be aware that I'm this way, and leave it at that? If I'm a perfectionist, is it enough to say I'm a perfectionist and I'm going to stay this way and I'm always going to be revisiting my papers, making sure that my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed? This is where you have to say, I'm aware of that, but do I want to do something to develop that? And so I don't want to stay there. So there's the whole point of understanding that and doing something about it. So it's the action that goes after. I think the main thing that blocks our self-awareness is not being able to see, to remove ourselves from the situation. So basically to see yourself as, this is what I'm consciously seeing about myself. I'm feeling this anxiety this morning. And you know what? I don't want to feel this anxiety, but it's there. I'm calling it. It's there. What am I going to do about it? So I think what blocks the self-awareness is not owning up to the emotions and the feelings that you're having, and not to have them with judgment. I think that's the most important thing. Not to judge yourself for feeling anxious. I'm anxious. I'm not judging that, but I know that that's the emotion I'm feeling. The thing is, what am I going to do with that emotion? How am I going to get it out of that anxiousness? So it's kind of separating the behavior and the feeling from yourself and not allowing yourself to get upset about it more, but to do something about it. Oh boy, okay. To stop rumination, use the stop meditation. Stop what you're doing, take a deep breath, observe your feelings or thoughts, proceed with intention and new thoughts. Yes, excellent. I like that. How to stop rumination, use the stop meditation. Stop what you are doing, take a deep breath, observe your feelings, your thoughts, proceed with intention. Okay, some are comments. Let me see what else is coming. We got that. If I missed anything. Okay, is there any other, when you say not to allow yourself to get upset about this, because once you know your authentic self in a deep level, it allows you to recognize that negative thought doesn't resonate with you. Yes. Yes, I like that comment. When you say not to allow yourself to get upset about it, is it because you know your authentic self in a deep level? It allows you to recognize that a negative thought doesn't resonate with you. Yes, negative thoughts don't resonate with me. You're right. I love that observation. But I think what I try to say to myself is that if I don't want, it's not that I don't want to get upset about it, is that I don't want to stay there. So this is where I want to leave from the victim and go to the solution, right? And go to the growth. So this doesn't serve me. This feeling doesn't serve me. I'm going to recognize it. I'm going to acknowledge it. This is happening. I'm human. It's okay. I can't avoid it, but I don't want to stay there. So what do I do to get out of it? And this is where I find ways to distract myself. So that's kind of what works for me. And I think we're all going to have to find what works for them. So as we're nearing, thank you very much for the questions and the comments. I just wanted to leave you also with my coordinates. I'm a HR consultant, but right now I'm doing a lot more coaching and facilitation, and I'm doing been doing some great workshops with the McGill alumni, and I've done some for Concordia and for Yes and La Passerelle. So I'm very passionate about the self-awareness. There's more to this than what I covered today. I dig deeper into how to get the external self-awareness in terms of feedback, and also to help individuals going through this process, because self-awareness requires those pillars, right? Understanding your values, your passion, all that. So if you need work with that, you can easily reach out to me and I can help you with that. I also wanted to mention that in light of, the whole self-awareness, if you do visit my website, I am giving some webinars this month of November on, it's a vision board workshop, and it's more on how to manifest your vision. But I don't talk about visualization just about creating that vision that you want for your future, which of course aligns with your values and your passions. But I also talk about visualization techniques and how that can help you stay motivated and have confidence and deal with some anxiety. So visualization is a wonderful tool to complement the whole self-awareness journey. So on that note, I'm going to say pass the note to either Kay or to Dahlia, or if not, I just want to thank everyone for being here. These are the resources that I used today, and I hope that you found the webinar insightful. And feel free to reach out to me either, like I said, via LinkedIn, or you can check out my website, which is in the middle of being constructed, but it's still there if you want to reach out. So I'm reading the chat. Thank you very much. I thank you for being here, and I hope that you found this insightful. And remember, self-awareness is a journey. So the fact that you're here today, you're just going to get that much more into that path of self-discovery. Thank you.